So when I was asked to do this, I was asked to talk about sustainable use. And quite frankly, I'm bored to death of talking about sustainable use. So I decided that I was going to talk about recapturing conservation. I'm going to touch on what Oscar said in his opening and some of what was just said now by George. So I'd like to play an image association with you. Please take this seriously now. I would like you, we say sustainable use, and there's been a few primers that have come before I asked you this question, but close your eyes for a second. Yes, close your eyes, please. Thank you. Thank you. And I want you to build up a mental image of what you think is sustainable use. What sort of image comes into your head? You can open your eyes again. So, which of you had this kind of image, if you just, by show of hands? 1, 2, a handful. Not that many. Okay, I've got my work cut out for me. I thought many would have this. Which of you had this kind of image? A few, most of you were probably blank because by then. Which of you had this kind of image? Hey, that's quite encouraging, eh? So sustainable use of plants, right, fantastic. Which of you had this kind of image in your head? Jeez, all right, actually. All right, so there's no environmental engineers here. Actually, if you Google it, this is the image that comes up. It's these images that come up if you put sustainable use into Google. And if you play around with wildlife, I didn't want to say wildlife because that then primes you immediately. But the point is, and George made this point, all of these things are actually sustainable use. And I would go so far as to say all of these things are consumptive use. Hiking in nature is a consumptive use of nature because as much as vegans would like to, herbivores would like to, they very often claim a moral high ground, but actually, all I believe they're doing is outsourcing their guilt further down the chain. They've got the blood of orangutans on their hands, and that's just a reality. No, all of us here, by being here today, being alive, breathing, we are displacing other species, and we have the blood of nature on our hands. It's just a reality. So we have to be a little bit more honest in how we approach nature. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and very briefly take you on a little journey through a few dark alleyways of my mind and end up somewhere back at this abstract. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to read the abstract. I did it in about an hour. I then unfortunately reread it last week and thought, my goodness, what was I smoking when I wrote that? But hopefully by the end of it, you'll have some understanding and you'll start to question the term conservation. So I don't know if any of you have read this book, The Invention of Nature. For those of you that haven't heard of it, I strongly encourage you to read it. It's a fantastic book. And what this book does is it tells us how nature is essentially a human construct. And it links back, as far as we understand it today, generally in a sort of Western-dominated philosophical approach. It generates back to the time of the Enlightenment. And Alexander von Humboldt came into prominence towards the end of the Enlightenment. And it's not really a story about how he invented nature, but it's actually a story of how he cobbled together nature. The understanding of nature. And we learn 3 things from this book, and those of you that have read it will understand, and those of you that are about to read it will understand once you've read it, that history is written by the victors. This was an amazing man. And following the First World War and the Second World War, the fact that he was German, he was written out of history. When you read the book, you will be blown away at how amazing he was. I knew who he was before I read the book. I was even more amazed afterwards. Brilliance can fade over time, but with a little rub, it shines again. And the bottom line of this book is that conversations matter. We have to talk to each other. And that collegiality takes us a very, very long way. And here I want to just quickly dive into the 3 C's that conservation really needs to address. And these are carbon, commercialization, and carrots. I couldn't get another C, so you'll understand what carrots is later. It's a bit difficult to do this. So carbon is reductive and seductive. Commercialization is been driven by greed. Never ever underestimate human greed. And we continue to reward failure in conservation. So carbon, we've all seen this. It's a very simple chart. And please make no mistake, I'm not a climate change denier. I believe in climate change. It's a very real and pressing issue. The problem is that we as conservationists have resolutely failed. We failed to take this on and take it a step further. So today, all our problems are equated with carbon, and the solutions are about reducing carbon, when I hope that most of you know that the solutions lie with a more resilient nature and biodiversity, not necessarily with reducing carbon. And if you look at the funding that's available for climate change versus the funding that's available for biodiversity, it's wrong, absolutely wrong. So we as the conservation community have to take up this challenge. We've tried. The Teague report never matched the Stern report, and we simply haven't had the Al Gore moment. So commercialization, I take the most brutal ones, and that's very relevant for South Africa. Hunters are coming to Namibia because they want free chase. That's why they're coming to Namibia. They're tired of this rubbish. So this is when it goes wrong, and we have to do more to stand up against this kind of nonsense. And I want to shout out to EWT, who have been taking this on, because many people that would donate money to EWT are those people that would pet lion cubs. And EWT have had the courage to take them on and say, you the people that end up with the canned lion, or result in the canned lion. Carrots. So I take the story of the Peregrine Fund. I'm going to have to be very brief about this. If any of you want to read the history, there's another great book about this. But at the time of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, peregrine falcon populations across North America were absolutely devastated. And a group of falconers got together and they said, we're going to save these birds. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we're definitely going to do it. And their sole aim was to get the peregrine falcon delisted from the Endangered Species Act in the US. In 1998, following a lot of hard work, captive breeding, hacking, releasing, etc., in 1998, the Peregrine Foundation, the Peregrine Fund said, we've been successful. The peregrine was delisted from the Endangered Species Act in North America. Falconers can get permits to go and trap wild peregrines and fly them at their leisure and pleasure. And as a falconer, I find that extremely satisfying. However, when it came to CITES in 2016, an absolute abomination occurred when the peregrine falcon was not delisted. Absolutely wrong. So here's an organization that now they've gone on to save the Mauritius kestrel, they've done other amazing work on the Aplomado falcon, etc., etc. They've gone well beyond the peregrine. They've reinvented themselves. They were highly successful, and yet we don't want to reward success. The peregrine has to remain on Appendix 1. And this is true for other species. We only value rarity, and we only target funding towards rarity. We have to do more to target success, and we have to think about how we can do it. Sorry, I don't have all the answers, but at least I can challenge you on that. So, conservation, the spaghetti should start to come together a little bit, don't panic. Conservation, it's tough. I don't know if any of you have seen this paper that came out from Timbavati. For those of you that haven't, it's really fascinating reading. So here you've got a reserve on the edge of Kruger, 24,000 photographic visitors, and 46 hunters. They bring in 2/3 of the revenue, those 46 hunters. So what's the choice here? Actually, some of you are nodding because you think you might have the answer. It depends what you want is the choice. If you want to have a semi-wilderness protected area with low impact, go for the 46 hunters. If you want to create inducement effects in the surrounding environment, if you want to introduce more people to nature, go for the 24,000 people. So it's not a simple, the point is it's not simple. And all of those are consumptive. The 24,000 photographic tourists, they have a high footprint. But maybe part of that footprint can drive economic development, so it's worth the trade-off. So let's recapture conservation, and I put up an image of Greenpeace. I like doing this to the hunters because then they start freaking out. But most of you, and I will bet the vast majority of you don't know the story of Greenpeace and the seal hunt. So when you see Greenpeace, you instinctively think, surely they're not up for sustainable use, are they? Anyone think they are? No? Right. So Greenpeace were at the forefront of the anti-fur campaign and sealing campaign in Canada. And if you go and look at it now, today, they are no longer at the forefront of that. Because they suddenly realized that their actions were having terrible consequences on the Inuit communities. Make no mistake, Greenpeace are completely anti the commercial harvesting of seals. I may or may not agree with them, but they are completely against commercial activities. However, they recognized that their campaigns were having these devastating effects, and they've actually apologized to the Inuit communities in Canada. So here's an organization that we think is beyond the pale when it comes to, let's say, hunting, the hunting part of sustainable use, but actually they're not. They are sensible people, and they will listen to reasonable arguments. So finally, my point is that we have to challenge our own preconceptions. There will always be the radical fringes. We have to do more to clean them up, particularly hunting. Hunting is a very dirty place at the moment, and trophy hunting in particular. And if we don't make efforts to clean it up, it will go, and it will not disappear. It'll just go underground. It'll be outlawed, and it'll go underground, but it will never stop. But above all else, it would be fantastic if the next time BBC, CNN, whoever, does an article on conservation, that they quote conservationists. I am tired of reading about how humane society are the conservationists, because they are not. They have a place. They are advocating animal rights, and they have a place in society to do that. I, for, have a place in society to advocate a very protectionist-orientated approach to conservation, but they are not conservationists. So let's stand up. Let's tell those idiot hunters just to pipe down, shut up, and clean up their house. And I'm disappointed that people like Stanberger didn't get more commendation for what they did when they stood up against some of the more moronic of our group. And let's challenge people. Let's challenge people about conversation. Take every opportunity at every dinner you go to, every time you drink a beer. Challenge people to talk about conservation. We don't have the answers. I promise you none of you have all the answers. But you'll be surprised at how people engage with complexity. And personally, I have a lot of hope for millennials. Millennials are proving to be people that want to know the backstory. They want to move beyond alternative facts and fake news. So I think there is a future. I think there's a strong future for sustainable use. And it's really up to us to talk more. People always like to say, too much conversation, not enough conservation. Well, actually, we need to have damn good conversations, because that's what drives good conservation. Thank you.